A heavy boot met flesh and bone, the impact resounding through the hushed courtroom like a sudden blast. Officer Brock Holloway loomed over the accused, a smug expression on his face, convinced he had delivered a lesson to some rootless vagrant who dared to overstep his bounds. The man, sprawled on the floor, shackled and silent, offered no cry, no wince. He merely lifted his gaze, his eyes devoid of emotion, sharp, calculating, and eerily serene. Holloway saw himself as the aggressor. Yet in that suspended moment, a palpable chill permeated the entire chamber. They hadn't apprehended a common criminal. They had cornered a predator. And with the ring of a telephone, the hunt was definitively concluded. The weathered sign marking the entrance to Oak Haven, Alabama, promised traditional Southern warmth and unwavering law enforcement. However, for Marcus Sterling, navigating the oppressive heat of a Tuesday afternoon in his matte black Ford F-150, it felt more like an elaborate snare. Marcus wasn't seeking confrontation. It was a state he rarely found himself in these days. At 34, he possessed a quietude born from experiencing an excess of discord. His knuckles, resting lightly on the steering wheel, bore scars, a testament to a history of conflict left behind in places like Kandahar and the Horn of Africa. He was a Master Chief Special Warfare Operator, a Navy SEAL with top-secret clearance, currently on a temporary respite from duty en route to visit his sister in Florida. He wore no uniform, just a simple, well-worn gray t-shirt, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. To the unobservant eye, he appeared like any other transient. To a jaundiced perspective, he was a marked target. Flashing blue and red lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Marcus sighed, the sound almost imperceptible against the drone of the air conditioning. He glanced at his speedometer. He was traveling at 45 miles per hour in a 50-mile-per-hour zone. His vehicle registration was up to date. His license plates were current. He guided his truck onto the gravel shoulder, the stones crunching loudly beneath his heavy tires, and shut off the engine. He lowered the window and placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide, a picture of non-aggression. In his side mirror, he observed the approaching officer. The man was substantial, with a thick neck and a haircut that seemed an unconvincing attempt at military bearing, lacking the required discipline. His uniform strained across his abdomen, the name tag reading Holloway. His hand was already resting on the grip of his service weapon. "License and registration," Holloway barked, not bothering to approach the window fully. He maintained a distance of 3 feet behind the B-pillar, a tactical stance, albeit carelessly executed. "Good afternoon, officer," Marcus replied, his voice a resonant, steady baritone. "It's in the glove compartment. I'm about to retrieve it." "I wasn't requesting a play-by-play, kid. I asked for the identification." Marcus paused. The insult was sharp, ingrained. He slowly reached over, opened the glove compartment, and retrieved his leather wallet. He presented his driver's license, a standard civilian permit from Florida. His military identification remained concealed. He had no desire to assert his rank unless absolutely necessary. His sole objective was to pass through Oak Haven without incident. Holloway snatched the plastic card, squinting at it under the intense sun. "Sterling, you're a considerable distance from Florida, Sterling. Just passing through, officer?" "Passing through?" Holloway echoed, leaning in close, his face mere inches from Marcus. The aroma of stale coffee and chewing tobacco wafted into the vehicle. "Do you have any idea why I stopped you?" "I was proceeding at 45 miles per hour, officer. You swerved, crossing the center line. I suspect you're operating under the influence." It was a falsehood, blatant and carelessly delivered. Marcus's eyes narrowed subtly, assessing the perceived threat. Holloway was clearly looking for a confrontation. Whether out of boredom, frustration, or sheer malice, Marcus had become his convenient target. "I haven't consumed any alcohol, officer. I'm readily willing to undergo a breathalyzer test." Holloway emitted a chuckle, a coarse, unpleasant sound. "Oh, that won't be necessary. I can detect it on you. Step out of the vehicle, officer." "I said, step out of the vehicle now," Holloway bellowed, his hand snapping the retention strap on his holster. Marcus mentally calculated the probabilities. He could disarm Holloway in under 2 seconds. He could incapacitate the man, break a wrist, crush a windpipe, and be back on his way before the dispatcher's radio even crackled. But that belonged to a past life, to the theater of war. Here, on American soil, the rules of engagement were fundamentally different. Here, he had to concede to prevail. Slowly, with deliberate movements, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stepped out, his height exceeding the officer's by 2 inches. The officer blinked, taken aback by Marcus's imposing stature. The drifter was built like a fortress, his solid muscle coiled beneath the gray cotton fabric. "Turn around. Hands on the hood," Holloway commanded, roughly pushing Marcus in the shoulder. Marcus did not falter, absorbing the impact as a solid wall might absorb a stray pebble. He placed his hands on the hot metal of the hood, spreading them wide. Holloway kicked Marcus's ankles apart with excessive force. He conducted a pat-down, his hands rough and intrusive. He found nothing but a wallet and a folded piece of paper in Marcus's back pocket. "What is this?" Holloway demanded, seizing the paper. "Personal correspondence," Marcus stated. He explained it was a letter from the Department of the Navy, specifically from Admiral Creighton, concerning his forthcoming Medal of Honor ceremony. However, Holloway made no move to open it. He simply crumpled it and shoved it into his own pocket. "You're under arrest for driving under the influence, resisting arrest, and let's add disorderly conduct." Holloway grinned. "You looked at me disrespectfully." "I have offered no resistance," Marcus stated calmly. "You're doing so now." Holloway seized Marcus's wrist and wrenched it behind his back, snapping the handcuffs on with agonizing tightness. "Welcome to Oak Haven. We don't tolerate your kind causing trouble here." As Marcus was pushed into the back of the cramped patrol car, he caught a glimpse of Holloway's face in the rearview mirror. The officer was on his phone, a grin plastered on his face. "Yeah, Sheriff, got a big one here. An out-of-towner. Looks like he might have some cash. Maybe drugs in the truck. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun with this one." Marcus leaned his head back against the partition. He closed his eyes and began the breathing exercises he had mastered during Bud's training. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Holloway remained oblivious. He had just placed handcuffs on a phantom. The holding cell within the Oak Haven County Courthouse reeked of bleach and despair. Marcus sat on the metal bench, his posture impeccably erect. He had undergone processing, been fingerprinted, and divested of his belt and shoelaces. His truck had been towed to the impound lot. His phone was confiscated. He had requested his single allotted phone call on 3 separate occasions. 3 times, the booking sergeant, a man named Miller, who bore a striking resemblance to Holloway, had scoffed and declared, "Phones are off. Budget cuts." Marcus understood the strategy. Isolate the target, break their spirit, force a guilty plea merely to end the ordeal. It was Wednesday morning when they finally escorted him out. He hadn't slept, yet it was not apparent. His eyes were clear, his face freshly shaven. He had used the cold water from the cell sink, and his demeanor remained resolutely composed. This unnerved the deputies. Prisoners typically wept, pleaded, or screamed. Marcus simply observed them. "Court is in session, Sterling," Holloway sneered, appearing at the cell door. He looked polished, his uniform immaculate, ready for his performance before the judge. "Judge Reynolds is a stickler. You'd best show some respect." "I always respect the law," Marcus said quietly, "when it is upheld." Holloway's face contorted. He jabbed his baton into Marcus's ribs. "Move!" The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had anticipated. Wood-paneled walls, a flickering fluorescent light overhead, and a gallery sparsely populated by unengaged locals. At the defense table sat a young woman with disheveled hair, a chaotic stack of files before her. Sarah Jenkins, the public defender. She appeared weary. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered as he sat down, handcuffed to the chair. "I'm Sarah. Look, I just received the file 5 minutes ago. Holloway claims you were swerving erratically, intoxicated, and made a move towards him." Marcus met her gaze. "I don't drink, and if I had made a move towards him, he wouldn't be standing." Sarah paused. observing the man beside her. She had represented hundreds of drifters, addicts, and petty offenders. She possessed an instinct for discerning when a client was fabricating. This man, she thought, this man felt different. There was a presence about him. Okay, she said, straightening her papers. But Judge Reynolds, he and Holloway have a long-standing relationship. Reynolds is up for re-election. He favors a tough stance on crime. They'll seek maximum sentencing to serve as a deterrent. If you plead guilty to the DUI, I might be able to get the resisting charge dismissed. You'd serve 6 months. I am not pleading guilty to something I did not do, Marcus stated. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Reynolds swept in, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a countenance that appeared chiseled from granite, and this not in a favorable manner. He disregarded the files, his attention fixed on the clock. Case number 4928, Reynolds droned. The State versus Marcus Sterling. Charges, DUI, resisting arrest, assault on an officer. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, Sarah declared, her voice wavering slightly. Reynolds peered over his spectacles at Marcus. Not guilty? Officer Holloway's report is quite detailed, son. It states you were belligerent. It claims you threatened him. The report is a fabrication, Your Honor, Marcus interjected. His voice carried to the rear of the room without any discernible effort. I did not grant you permission to speak. Reynolds slammed his gavel. You will speak when addressed. I am speaking now, Marcus continued undeterred. I requested a breathalyzer test. It was refused. I requested a blood test. Refused. I requested my call to legal counsel. Refused. This entire proceeding constitutes a violation of my constitutional rights. The courtroom fell into a profound silence, a vagrant citing the Constitution. Holloway, standing near the witness stand, let out a nervous laugh. He's a sea lawyer, Judge. Probably picked up some fancy terminology in the joint. Approach the bench, Reynolds hissed. Sarah rose, but Marcus remained seated, his eyes locked on Holloway. The officer was smirking again, secure in his perceived dominion. This was his kingdom. Mr. Sterling, Reynolds said, leaning forward, his voice laced with malice. In this county, my word is the law. You believe you can enter my town, drive inebriated, assault my officers, and then lecture me on rights? I am a United States citizen, Marcus stated, and I serve in the United States Navy. I demand to contact my commanding officer. Navy? Reynolds scoffed. You look like a bum. Stolen valor is also a crime, you know. I should add that to the list. Examine my wallet, Marcus suggested. The military identification is located behind the license. Holloway froze. He had not looked behind the license. He had made an assumption. Reynolds turned to Holloway. Brock, check his ID. I saw his Florida license, Judge. He's lying, just trying to stall. I don't have time for this. Reynolds snapped. Bail is set at $50,000. Remand him into custody pending trial. Your Honor, that is excessive for a DUI, Sarah protested. He assaulted an officer, and he is a flight risk, Reynolds bellowed. And if he speaks out of turn one more time, I will hold him in contempt. Marcus's gaze drifted to the flag standing in the corner of the room. The gold fringe shimmered in the light. He had shed blood for that flag. He had witnessed friends perish for that flag, and now these men were employing it as a shield for their corruption. A cold, sharp anger began to stir within his chest, but he suppressed it. He needed to be strategic. Officer Holloway, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. You took a letter from my pocket, a letter from Admiral Creighton. Where is it? Holloway paled. He recalled the crumpled piece of paper. He had discarded it in the trash receptacle outside the station. I have no knowledge of what you are referring to, Holloway lied. You are under oath, Marcus stated. Shut up, Holloway shouted. Stepping away from the stand and advancing towards the defense table, the bailiff made no move to stop him. Reynolds remained impassive. You will shut your mouth, boy, or I will do it for you. Holloway now towered over Marcus, the veins in his neck visibly engorged. Is that a threat, officer? Marcus looked up, completely unfazed. That look, that utter absence of fear, shattered Holloway. He thrived on fear. He required it. When it was absent, he panicked. Holloway drew back his leg. "No!" Sarah screamed. But it was too late. Holloway's heavy tactical boot slammed into Marcus's chest. The chair tipped backward. Marcus hit the floor with a jarring impact, the handcuffs digging into his wrists, the air knocked from his lungs. The courtroom collectively gasped. Even the listless locals sat up. Holloway stood panting, in realizing he had just assaulted a handcuffed defendant in open court. Judge Reynolds appeared startled, but quickly regained his composure. The defendant lunged. "I witnessed it. Officer Holloway was defending the court." Marcus lay on the floor, tasting blood. He could feel a bruised rib, possibly a hairline fracture. He took a deep, measured breath. He rolled onto his side and looked up at Holloway. He did not grimace. He smiled, a chilling, predatory expression. "That," Marcus whispered, "was a mistake." The cell door slammed shut with a finality that vibrated through the concrete floor. Marcus lay on the thin, stained mattress, his breathing shallow. The kick to his ribs had not fractured the bone. He recognized the distinct, sharp grinding pain of a break, but the bruising was extensive, likely impacting his intercostal muscles. Every breath was an exertion. Officer Holloway had not merely kicked him, he had dragged him down the corridor, laughing alongside two other deputies, cracking jokes about tripping and clumsy prisoners. They had stripped him of his dignity, or so they presumed. But dignity was not something individuals like Holloway could confiscate. Dignity resided within. An hour elapsed. The sun began its descent, casting long striped shadows across the floor. Footsteps approached. Not the heavy stomping tread of Holloway, but the distinct click of heels. "Deputy, grant me access. I need to confer with my client regarding his plea," a female voice inquired. It was Sarah Jenkins. "5 minutes, Sarah, and don't pass him anything," the guard grumbled. The keys rattled, and the door swung open. Sarah stepped inside. She appeared altered from her courtroom persona. The weariness had been supplanted by a nervous, almost frantic energy. Her hands trembled as she clutched her briefcase. "Oh my God," she whispered, observing the dark bruise already forming on Marcus's jaw where he had impacted the floor. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. I've witnessed them employ rough tactics before, but that, in front of the judge, it's what they do when they believe no one is observing." Marcus rasped, sitting up slowly. He winced, his hand instinctively going to his side. "Even when everyone is observing." "I'm going to file a motion," Sarah stated, though her conviction seemed to waver. "I'll report this to the state bar. I'll contact the ACLU. But Reynolds, he knows everyone. The prosecutor, the mayor. It's a boys' club, Marcus. They're going to bury you. If you don't accept a plea, they'll keep you here for months before the trial. You'll decay in this cell." Marcus looked at her. He perceived a good person trapped within a corrupt system. She was young, idealistic, and completely out of her depth. "I am not pleading, Sarah," Marcus said calmly, "and I am not decaying here." "How can you remain so composed?" she hissed, crouching to avoid being overheard by the guard outside. "They just assaulted you. You're facing felony charges." "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that commanded absolute attention. "Do you have a phone?" Sarah blinked. Yes, but I'm not permitted to let you use it. If Holloway discovers me, I don't need to use it. You do." Marcus leaned forward. The pain in his ribs intensified, but his eyes were piercing, disburning, with a cold intensity. "You heard me mention Admiral Creighton in court." Holloway laughed. Reynolds laughed. "They believe I'm a homeless veteran fabricating stories." "Aren't you?" Sarah asked gently. "Marcus, it's all right if you are. PTSD is a genuine condition. I can arrange for assistance." "Listen to me." The authority in his voice arrested her. It was not the voice of a drifter. It was the voice of a man who had guided teams through darkness and brought them back intact. "My designation is Master Chief Marcus Sterling, SEAL Team 6. I am currently on leave following a deployment in the Horn of Africa. The correspondence Holloway discarded was a notification for the Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony in Washington, D.C. next month. Sarah stared at him. The silence within the cell was deafening. She observed his hands, like scarred and lethal. She noted his posture. She recognized the unwavering truth in his eyes. "If that is accurate," she whispered, her face paling, "then they have assaulted a highly decorated active duty service member." "They have," Marcus nodded, "and they are detaining me without legitimate cause. They have seized federal correspondence. They have infringed upon my civil liberties." He recited a sequence of numbers from memory. It was a Washington, D.C. area code. "Memorize this number, Sarah. Do not write it down. 2025519, extension 4. Request General Vance. Inform him that Viper has been grounded in Oak Haven." "Viper," Sarah repeated, her heart pounding. "Just relay that message and mention the assault." Sarah stood up, feeling a wave of dizziness. This was preposterous. If he was lying, she would appear utterly foolish contacting the Pentagon, but if he was speaking the truth— "Time's up," the guard bellowed, rapping his baton against the bars. Sarah looked at Marcus one final time. "I hope you're genuine, Marcus. Make the call, Sarah. Burn it all down." Sarah hurried out of the cell, clutching her briefcase to her chest as if it were a shield. She bypassed the desk. She paid no heed to the deputies snickering as she passed. She exited the courthouse into the sweltering Alabama heat and entered her dilapidated Honda Civic. She drove 3 blocks to a gas station parking lot. Her hands were trembling so violently she dropped her phone twice. She dialed the number. Ring. Ring. Pentagon switchboard. Secure line. A crisp, automated voice responded. Sarah froze. It was real. I need to speak with General Vance," she stammered. "Extension 4, authorization code." I don't have one, but a man named Marcus Sterling told me to call. He said Viper has been grounded." There was a pause, a silence that stretched for 5 seconds but felt like an eternity. "Hold the line, madam. Do not disconnect. We are tracing your location for verification." Sarah's eyes widened. Tracing. Suddenly, a new voice joined the line. It was deep, resonant, and exuded authority. "This is General Vance. Who is speaking, and where is Master Chief Sterling?" "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am a public defender in Oak Haven, Alabama. Marcus, Mr. Sterling, is in the county jail. He has been arrested." "Arrested?" The general's voice deepened. It wasn't anger. It was something far more menacing. "On what charges?" "DUI, resisting arrest, assault on an officer. But General, it's a fabrication. He was not intoxicated. And in court today, the arresting officer, he kicked Marcus while he was handcuffed on the floor. The judge witnessed it and did nothing." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the silence of a predator identifying its prey. "Is he injured?" "He's bruised. He's in pain, but he is calm. Terrifyingly calm." "Yes, he does that," Vance muttered. "Miss Jenkins, listen to me very carefully. You are safe. You have rendered a service to your country today. Return to your office and await further instructions. Do not return to the jail. Do not speak with the sheriff." "What? What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We are coming to retrieve him," Vance stated. "And may God have mercy on anyone who obstructs our path." The line went dead. Sheriff Buford T. Miller was a man who savored life's simple pleasures, bourbon, college football, and presiding as the undisputed sovereign of Oak Haven County. He sat in his office, feet propped on his desk, roaring with laughter as Holloway recounted the events in the courtroom. "And then you kicked him?" Miller wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Right in front of Reynolds." "Damn right, Sheriff," Holloway grinned, popping a peanut into his mouth. "Should have seen him fold. Big tough guy." It buckled like a cheap chair. Reynolds covered for me, claiming the fellow charged. "We got him, boss. We're going to book him for assault, keep him locked up for 6 months, maybe put him on the road crew. Teach him some respect. Good work, Brock. Miller acknowledged with a nod. Outsiders need to understand. This is our territory. The timepiece on the wall showed past 4 in the afternoon. Outside, the heavens were beginning to blush with shades of violet and amber. It had been a tranquil evening until the telephone on the sheriff's desk chirped to life. Not the primary line, but the secure channel, reserved exclusively for the mayor and the governor. Miller scowled, lowering his feet. Yes, Sheriff Miller. Sheriff. A voice laced with panic crackled through the receiver. It belonged to the air traffic controller at the modest county airfield located 5 miles from town. Sheriff, something significant is unfolding today. What? No. Why? Because I've just received a priority override from the FAA. They've just established a flight path for heavy transport. Military designations. 3 Black Hawks and a C-130 Hercules are entering our airspace. They're not responding to my radio calls. They've just transmitted a priority 1 code. A shiver traced its way down Miller's spine. Military? Probably just a drill, a flyby. Sheriff, they're not flying over. The controller's voice rose in urgency. They're descending. They're landing on the highway. Route 9. What? Miller stood abruptly. That's 2 miles from the station. Before he could fully grasp the situation, the station door burst inward. Deputy Clelitis, a young man typically stationed at the front counter, rushed in, his face ashen. Sheriff, you must see this. You need to look outside. Miller and Holloway moved towards the window. Oak Haven was a placid settlement. The most clamorous event usually involved a truck's exhaust backfiring, but now a deep, resonant vibration was causing the sheriff's office window panes to tremble. The tremor intensified, a consistent percussive thrumming that set the coffee mugs on the desk rattling. Is that? Holloway squinted. 3 dark silhouettes roared overhead, clearing the rooftops of Main Street. They flew incredibly low, their proximity unnerving. The powerful downdraft whipped dust and debris from the gutters. The sound was overwhelming, a palpable force that buffeted the building. Black Hawk helicopters, devoid of any markings save for faint gray numerals on their tails. They hovered over the courthouse plaza, their rotors slicing the air with brutal efficiency. What in tarnation is happening? Holloway bellowed above the din. Abruptly, the desk phone rang again. Then the dispatch radio crackled. Then the fax machine whirred to life. Sheriff! The dispatcher shrieked from the adjoining room. State troopers are calling. They report the highway is blocked. A convoy is approaching. They claim federal authority. Miller snatched his hat. Everyone to the front now. Bring the shotguns. Sheriff, perhaps we should reconsider. Cletus stammered. I said move. Miller, Holloway, and 4 other deputies hurried onto the front steps of the sheriff's precinct. They aimed their shotguns and sidearms, uncertain of their target, but prepared to defend their jurisdiction. The helicopters had retreated, circling like predatory birds. But the sight approaching down Main Street was enough to turn Miller's blood to ice. It was a convoy, but unlike any they had witnessed. Leading the procession were 4 black SUVs bearing government plates, their grills flashing with red and blue lights. And behind them lumbered a massive armored personnel carrier, and flanking it were 2 military Humvees, their gunners occupying the turrets. Though the weapons were angled downwards, the threat was undeniable. The convoy screeched to a halt directly in front of the station. The door of the lead SUV swung open before the vehicle had fully stopped. A man emerged. He wore a dark navy dress uniform, impeccably tailored and sharp. The gold braid on his sleeves extended fully. An admiral. He was immediately followed by 6 individuals clad in full tactical gear. Helmets, body armor, automatic rifles held at the ready. They bore no police insignia, instead trident insignias, the mark of Navy SEALs. Holloway's shotgun quivered in his hands. Sheriff, who are they? Lower your weapons, Miller whispered, his voice strained. Lower them, immediately. The Admiral strode up the steps, disregarding the weapons pointed in his general vicinity. He halted 3 feet from Miller. He was an older man, gray-haired with a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite and resentment. I am Admiral Creighton, he barked. Who is the commanding officer of this facility? I am, Miller stammered, holstering his weapon. Sheriff Buford Miller. Now listen here. You cannot simply land helicopters in my town. And shut your mouth, Creighton commanded. It wasn't a shout, but an order. You are presently holding a Tier 1 asset of the United States government. Master Chief Marcus Sterling. You have 10 seconds to produce him, or I will authorize these men to dismantle this building brick by brick to find him. Holloway stepped forward, attempting to project authority. Now hold on a minute. That individual is a criminal. He assaulted an officer. He's being held. Creighton's gaze shifted to Holloway. He examined the name tag. He observed the ill-fitting uniform. He perceived the apprehension masked by arrogance. Officer Holloway, I presume? Creighton inquired softly. Yeah, that's me. The one who kicks men in cuffs? Holloway froze. How do you know? We know everything, Creighton stated. He turned to the tactical team leader positioned behind him. Lieutenant, secure the perimeter. No one exits. I want federal warrants served on every computer and filing cabinet in this building. Should anyone resist, neutralize them. Yes, sir, the lieutenant responded. The team moved with astonishing speed, passing the bewildered deputies and entering the station. Where is he? Creighton demanded, invading Miller's personal space. Cell 4, Miller squeaked. The back corridor. Lead the way, Creighton ordered. And pray he's in one piece. Because if he has so much as a scratch on him that wasn't present when he entered this county, your freedom is at an end. They proceeded through the station. The local deputies were pressed against the walls, disarmed and bound with zip ties by the SEAL team with swift, silent movements. The balance of power had shifted so drastically that Miller felt as though he were in a dream. They reached cell 4. Marcus was standing by the bars, leaning casually. He appeared weary and his jaw was swollen, but he remained upright. Upon seeing the Admiral, he straightened his posture, snapping to attention despite the discomfort in his ribs. Master Chief, Creighton acknowledged, his eyes scanning Marcus for any injuries. He noted the contusion, his jaw tightening. Admiral, Marcus replied. Apologies for disrupting your week, sir. You haven't disrupted it, son. You've made it interesting. Creighton turned to the deputy, holding the keys, a visibly trembling young man named Cletus. Open it. Cletus fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking the door. Marcus stepped out. He did not acknowledge the sheriff. He walked directly towards Holloway, who was being restrained by 2 SEAL operators. Holloway appeared diminished now. The bully had vanished, replaced by a frightened child realizing the ramifications of his actions. Officer Holloway, Marcus stated quietly. I didn't know, Holloway whispered. I didn't know who you were. It shouldn't have mattered, Marcus countered. It shouldn't matter who I am. You took an oath. You disgraced it. Marcus turned back to Creighton. Sir, I request permission to retrieve my personal effects, specifically a letter pertaining to the ceremony. The letter you discarded? Creighton inquired, his eyes fixed on Holloway. The very same. Tear this place apart, Creighton instructed his men. Find it. As the station transformed into a whirlwind of federal activity, the front doors opened once more. A man in a sharp, dark suit entered, carrying a briefcase. He exuded an air of predatory intelligence. Admiral, the man said. I'm with the JAG Corps. We've just served the electronic warrant on the dashcam footage from Holloway's cruiser. It appears the system error they claimed erased the footage was easily circumvented by our tech team. Miller gasped. We deleted that. Not thoroughly enough, the lawyer stated with a thin smile. We possess the audio. We have the video of the stop. No swerving, no resistance, merely Officer Holloway escalating a situation and fabricating an arrest. He turned to Miller and Holloway. Gentlemen, you are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping, assault on a federal officer, and conspiracy. And since this involves a military asset, you will be processed in federal court, not your comfortable county setup. Holloway's knees buckled. He slumped against the wall. Marcus observed them. He felt the ache in his ribs, but the pain seemed distant now. He looked at the Admiral. "Sir, there is one more matter," Marcus said. "The judge." Creighton smiled, a chillingly hard expression. "Worry not, Master Chief. We've saved the best for last. Get in the SUV. We're proceeding to the courthouse." Judge Reynolds sat elevated on his mahogany bench, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. The air conditioning in the courtroom hummed, struggling against the oppressive Alabama humidity. But Reynolds felt a coolness within him. He had just handed down a sentence of 90 days to a local mechanic for overdue parking citations, a sentence that would conveniently compel the mechanic to sell his business to Reynolds' silent partner for a pittance. This was the modus operandi of Oak Haven. It was a finely tuned engine of suffering and profit, with Reynolds as its orchestrator. He glanced at the docket. "Next case," he grumbled. Sarah Jenkins sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly. She had returned to the courtroom as instructed, but she was terrifyingly alone. She had received no communication from the general since their call. Had they abandoned her? Had Holloway discovered something? Every time the bailiff glanced her way, she flinched. "State versus Timothy Ruggles," the bailiff announced. "Hold on," Reynolds interrupted, peering over his spectacles. "Where is Officer Holloway? He is the testifying officer in this matter." The bailiff consulted his radio. "Dispatch is not responding, Your Honor. Likely out on a call. Perhaps the Sterling individual caused further complications." Reynolds chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Probably tripped down the stairs on his way to transport. A pity. Well, we shall proceed without him." Boom. The double doors at the rear of the courtroom did not merely open. They were flung wide with such force that one of them struck the plaster wall with a crack. Every head in the gallery swiveled. Judge Reynolds rose, his face flushing with indignation. "Order! Order in this court! Who dares?" His voice faltered and died in his throat. Marching down the central aisle was not a lawyer nor a local deputy, but a formation of 6 Navy SEALs in full tactical gear. Rifles slung, helmets affixed, their faces obscured by ballistic eyewear. They moved with a fluid, unnerving synchronization, clearing the aisle like a plow through snow. At the center of the formation walked Admiral Creighton, his dress blues starkly contrasting with the tactical attire of his men, and beside him, walking freely, was Marcus Sterling. Marcus had tidied himself up. He had washed the blood from his face in the station's restroom. He held his head high, his gaze locking instantly onto Reynolds. "What is the meaning of this?" Reynolds shrieked, striking his gavel. "Bailiff, arrest these men! This is a court of law!" The bailiff, a portly man named Carl, eyed the SEALs. He eyed their automatic rifles. He eyed his own holstered taser. He slowly raised his hands and stepped away from the bench. "I'm not doing that, Judge." Admiral Creighton stopped at the bar, the wooden railing separating the gallery from the legal proceedings. "Judge Jeremiah Reynolds," Creighton's voice boomed, filling the room without amplification. "I am Admiral Thomas Creighton, United States Navy. You are currently presiding over a criminal enterprise masquerading as a court of justice. You possess no jurisdiction here." Reynolds spat, though his hands trembled. "This is Oak Haven County. Leave before I hold you in contempt." "I don't believe you comprehend the chain of command, Jeremiah." A smooth voice interjected. From behind the SEALs, the JAG lawyer, Commander Vance, no relation to the general, but equally astute, stepped forward. He placed a heavy black Pelican case on the defense table next to a stunned Sarah Jenkins. "We are invoking the Patriot Act and the Uniform Code of Military Justice," Vance stated calmly, opening the case to reveal a high-tech projector and communications unit. "We have declared this courthouse a crime scene under federal jurisdiction due to the kidnapping and torture of a Tier 1 military asset." "Kidnapping?" Reynolds scoffed nervously. "Mr. Sterling was arrested for DUI." "Was he?" Vance pressed a button. A large projection screen, hastily erected by 2 of the SEALs in mere seconds, flickered to life. The video was crystal clear, high-definition dashcam footage. The courtroom watched in silence as the screen displayed Marcus's truck driving perfectly within its lane. They watched Holloway pull him over. They heard the dialogue. No slurring, no stumbling. They witnessed the escalation. They saw the letter being pilfered. Then Vance clicked on a new file. "And this," Vance announced, his voice hardening, "is the security footage from within this very courtroom 3 hours ago. The footage you ordered deleted, Your Honor." The screen changed. It showed the earlier hearing. It showed Marcus in handcuffs. It showed Holloway's boot connecting with Marcus's ribs. And then it revealed the most damning detail of all. It showed Judge Reynolds observing the event. It depicted him flinching, then settling back into his chair. It captured him, stating the officer was protecting the court. The silence in the room was absolute. The local residents in the gallery, individuals who had endured Reynolds' oppressive reign for decades, began to murmur. Then the murmurs escalated into angry whispers. "You lied," Sarah Jenkins declared, rising to her feet. Her voice resonated with newfound strength. "You witnessed him strike a handcuffed man, and you entered it into the record as self-defense." Reynolds slumped into his chair. He appeared diminished. The granite facade had crumbled to dust. I have connections in the Senate," Reynolds whispered weakly. "You cannot touch me." Marcus stepped forward. He walked through the gate, past Sarah, and stood directly beneath the bench. He looked up at the man who had attempted to ruin his life for sport. "Your friends are not present," Marcus stated softly, "but mine are." Admiral Creighton gestured to the team leader. "Lieutenant, secure the package." 2 SEALs ascended the steps to the bench. Reynolds scrambled backward, tripping over his robe and sending his gavel clattering to the floor. "Get your hands off me! I am a judge!" he screamed as they secured his hands behind his back with zip ties. "Not anymore," the lieutenant replied. As they escorted Reynolds out of the courtroom, past the dumbfounded onlookers, Marcus turned to the gallery. He saw fear in their eyes. Fear of authority. Fear of power. "It is over," Marcus informed them. "The sheriff is in custody. Holloway is in custody. The judge is gone." He turned to Sarah Jenkins. She was weeping, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You made the call," Marcus said, extending his hand. "You saved me." Sarah took his hand. It felt warm and calloused. "I believe you saved us all, Marcus. This entire town, we've been drowning." "Not anymore," Marcus reiterated. But as the adrenaline subsided, a nagging suspicion surfaced. He observed the files Vance was packing. He noticed the terrified expression of the bailiff. "Admiral," Marcus said, turning to Creighton. "Why? Why? What is it, son? Why did they do this? Holloway was a thug, certainly, but Reynolds, he risked everything to expedite my conviction. He wanted me imprisoned immediately. Why the haste?" Creighton frowned. "We assumed it was mere prejudice and power-tripping." "No," Marcus shook his head. "Holloway said something during the traffic stop. He remarked, 'Looks like he might have cash.' And in the cell, the guard mentioned they needed to meet quotas for the contract." Marcus looked at the JAG lawyer, managing the prison here. Vance checked his tablet. "It's a county jail. But wait, it's managed by a private contractor, a company called Sentinel Corrections and Logistics." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Sentinel, I know them. They operate in conflict zones, mercenaries masquerading as security. Investigate the ownership," Marcus commanded. Vance tapped furiously, his eyes widening. "Sentinel Corrections is a subsidiary of a holding company, Reynolds Land Trust." The courtroom fell deathly silent once more. "The judge owns the prison company?" Sarah gasped. "He arrests people." Marcus realized the pieces clicking into place like the bolt of a rifle. "He convicts them in his own court. He sentences them to his own prison. And then he charges the state for their upkeep. And he utilizes asset forfeiture laws to seize their vehicles, their cash, their homes, to cover legal fees," Vance concluded. "It's not a justice system," Marcus growled. "It's a human trafficking operation." Admiral Creighton's face darkened to a deep shade of purple. They were prepared to sell a Navy SEAL for profit. They were going to try, Marcus stated. He looked towards the doorway through which Reynolds had been removed. "Admiral, we are not finished. We have the head of the snake, but we must burn down the entire nest." The sun had set over Oak Haven, but the town was illuminated more brightly than it had been in years. Floodlights from military generators bathed the town square in an artificial glow. The local residents, typically confined to their homes after dark, were out in the streets, observing federal agents dismantling the corruption that had suffocated them for a decade. But Marcus was not in the square. He was in the back of a black SUV, speeding down a dirt road 5 miles north of town, escorted by the SEAL convoy. "The target is a warehouse complex on the outskirts of the county," Vance explained, pointing to a map on a tablet. "According to Reynolds' confiscated laptop, this is the headquarters for Sentinel Corrections. It's where they process the high-value assets seized from inmates." "My truck," Marcus stated. "And likely millions in stolen property," Vance added. "But Marcus, you're injured. You should be in the medevac." "My ribs are bruised, Commander. My hands work perfectly," Marcus replied, checking the chamber of the Sig Sauer. P286 the Admiral had returned to him. It was his personal sidearm, retrieved from the sheriff's safe. "I'm seeing this through." The convoy extinguished their lights as they approached the compound. It was encircled by a tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras were ubiquitous. "Thermal imaging indicates 12 heat signatures inside," the team leader, a calm giant named Dutch, reported over the comms. "Armed civilians among them. Appears they're using prisoners as labor. Slave labor," Marcus muttered. "Rules of engagement?" Dutch inquired of the Admiral. "Hostile," Creighton responded. "They are armed combatants involved in a federal kidnapping conspiracy. Neutralize them." The lead SUV rammed the gate. Crash. The metal groaned and snapped. The convoy surged into the yard. "Federal agents down! Get down!" Gunfire erupted immediately. The Sentinel guards, now private mercenaries paid to protect the judge's illicit gains, did not surrender. They opened fire with automatic weapons from the loading dock. Marcus was out of the vehicle before it came to a complete stop. He moved instinctively, the pain in his side forgotten, replaced by the flow state of combat. He rolled behind a stack of crates, double-tapping 2 rounds into the shoulder of a mercenary on the catwalk. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. "Advance, flank left," Dutch commanded. The SEALs moved like water, efficient, lethal. The mercenaries were accustomed to bullying prisoners and intimidating locals. They were unprepared for Tier 1 operators. Marcus advanced towards the main office door. A guard emerged, raising a shotgun. Marcus did not hesitate. He sidestepped, grabbed the barrel, wrenched it downwards, and delivered a palm strike to the man's chin. The guard collapsed instantly. Marcus kicked the door open. Inside, the warehouse resembled a department store. Rows of luxury vehicles, motorcycles, stacks of electronics, jewelry, and safes. It was the spoils of 1,000 illegal arrests. In the core of the chamber, a gentleman was in a frenzy, tearing apart paperwork. He was sharp, clad in a suit that exceeded Marcus' yearly earnings. "Remain stationary," Marcus commanded, aiming his firearm. The man froze. He glanced at Marcus, then at the shredding device. "You can't enter this location. This is private premises. Sentinel Corrections holds a pact with the government." "Pacts are rescinded," Marcus stated. He approached and disconnected the shredder. He observed the partially obliterated document grasped by the man. It was a financial record. Marcus wrested it free. He perused the initial entry. Subject, Marcus Sterling. Estimated worth, $40,000. Vehicle, $50,000. Cash holdings. Disposition, perpetual confinement. Rationale, elevated risk. No kin. "No kin," Marcus vocalized. He met the man's gaze. "You assumed I had no support." We scanned the databases," the man stammered, perspiration beading. "We seek out transients, individuals who are unmissed. It's purely transactional." "You selected the incorrect transient," Marcus replied. Dutch and the remainder of the unit had secured the area. Admiral Creighton entered, surveying the millions in pilfered merchandise. "My word," Creighton breathed. "They've been engaged in this for eons. Hundreds of casualties. thousands, Sarah Jenkins declared. She had insisted on accompanying them, and wearing a bulletproof vest over her legal attire. She strode to a filing cabinet and withdrew a drawer. These are case files. Individuals I represented, people I advised to confess guilt because I believed there was no alternative. They were innocent, every one of them. She sank to her knees, weeping. The crushing weight of remorse, the dawning comprehension that she had been an unwitting pawn in this scheme, overwhelmed her. Marcus holstered his sidearm. He moved toward Sarah and knelt beside her, disregarding the sharp twinge in his ribs. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, look at me." She raised her head, her eyes crimson. "You were unaware," Marcus affirmed resolutely. "But once you understood, you acted. You made the pivotal decision. You are the reason this ceases today. You are not a pawn, Sarah. And you are the heroine of this account." Sarah wiped her eyes. She gazed at the files. "I will sue them," she whispered. "I will sue them for every cent. I will secure the release of every single one of these individuals." "And we shall assist you," Admiral Creighton pledged. "Navy JAG will provide support for the exonerations. We do not abandon our people." Marcus rose and walked to the rear of the storage facility. There, concealed beneath a canvas, sat his Ford F-150. It bore scratches. The interior had been ransacked, but it was still present. He opened the door. The letter from the Admiral was absent, but something else remained beneath the seat, tucked away in a compartment the mercenaries had overlooked. He retrieved a small velvet receptacle. He opened it. Within lay the Purple Heart he had earned in Afghanistan. He clutched it tightly. They had not taken everything. "Chief," Dutch called out, "the servers are encrypted, but we will breach them. This extends to the governor's office. Reynolds was diverting funds to a syndicate." "Excellent," Marcus responded. "Dismantle them all." He exited the warehouse and stepped into the night air. The flashing lights of the convoy were now joined by news vehicles. The narrative had erupted. The world was observing Oak Haven. Marcus leaned against his truck. He was utterly depleted. His body ached, but the air tasted purer than it had in days. Admiral Creighton joined him. "Are you all right, Marcus?" "I will be, sir." "You understand the ceremony is in 3 weeks. Do you believe you'll be sufficiently recovered to stand for the president?" Marcus observed his bruised knuckles. "I've endured worse, sir." "What are your plans now?" Creighton inquired. "We can transport you to Bethesda, arrange for a thorough medical examination." Marcus looked at Sarah Jenkins, who was already on her mobile, coordinating with the press for the liberation of those unjustly incarcerated. "I believe I shall remain here for a few days, sir," Marcus stated. "I have witness testimony to prepare, and I feel I owe my legal counsel a dinner." Creighton smiled. "Permission granted, Master Chief. Permission granted." The restoration of Oak Haven spanned several months, but the repercussions were immediate. The footage of Holloway assaulting Marcus went viral globally within hours, amassing millions of views and igniting a national upheaval. The Department of Justice did not merely investigate, they initiated a purge. Sheriff Miller, Officer Holloway, and Judge Reynolds faced trial 6 months later. This time, the courtroom presented a drastically different aspect. There were no friendly faces in the audience, only grim federal prosecutors and the families of their victims. Holloway wept openly as he was sentenced to 20 years in federal penitentiary. Reynolds, stripped of his judicial robes, his assets, and his dignity, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for operating a criminal enterprise under the veneer of legal authority. The irony was not lost on anyone when they were transported to a federal correctional facility, one that held absolutely no contractual agreements with the Reynolds Land Trust. Sarah Jenkins ascended to the position of district attorney in a decisive special election. Her inaugural official action was to nullify over 500 wrongful convictions orchestrated by the Reynolds administration. She had discovered her voice, and she was no longer speaking in hushed tones. She transformed the corrupt courthouse into a beacon of genuine justice. As for Master Chief Marcus Sterling, he stood with pride in the East Room of the White House 3 weeks hence. The president bestowed the Medal of Honor around his neck, acknowledging his valor on foreign soil. However, for the inhabitants of Oak Haven, watching on television, his most significant struggle had transpired on their own territory. He did not linger in the public eye, however. True to his inherent nature, he packed his truck, shook Sarah's hand one final time, and departed into the twilight. He was a silent sentinel, a protector who materialized when required and vanished once his duty was fulfilled. Yet Oak Haven would perpetually recall that Tuesday afternoon when they attempted to breach a seal, only to discover that it was they themselves who were crafted from fragile glass. What an extraordinary journey of justice! It is disquieting to contemplate the ease with which authority can be misused when corrupt officials believe they are unobserved. Nevertheless, it is immeasurably gratifying to witness the outcome when the virtuous finally retaliate. Marcus Sterling demonstrated that genuine fortitude is not contingent upon being the most vociferous individual present. It involves discerning precisely when to render the appropriate judgment. He did not solely rescue himself, he preserved an entire community. What would your course of action have been if you occupied Sarah's predicament? Would you have jeopardized your profession and personal safety to place that call to the Pentagon? Or would you have opted for a more cautious approach? Please share your perspectives in the commentary section below. If you found this account of swift retribution and ultimate justice to your liking, kindly express your appreciation by activating the like button. It significantly aids in the channel's expansion. Remember to disseminate this video to a compatriot who relishes tales of well-deserved payback, and subscribe with notifications enabled to ensure you never miss our subsequent dramatic presentation. Thank you for viewing.